in 2011. A heavy equipment operator named Sha Funk was working at a mine in northern Alberta when he stumbled upon something truly bizarre. The stones he unearthed were an unusual color, covered in odd patterns. He stopped his machine to get a closer look, and soon his supervisor realized this was no ordinary rock. What Funk had found looked like a sleeping dragon. As they carefully uncovered more pieces, it became clear they were looking at the fossilized skin of a dinosaur called a Nodosaur. But this wasn't just another skeleton. It was one of the best preserved dinosaur fossils ever found, so intact that it looked like a dragon petrified in the middle of a nap. It was so lifelike. A paleobiologist from the University of Bristol said it looked as if it had only been dead for a few weeks. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was a hyper-realistic sculpture. How could something survive for 110 million years in such perfect condition? Once fully excavated, researchers determined the dinosaur was over 5 meters long and weighed around 1,300 kilograms. Today, you can see it at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada, and it's a sight to behold. The fossil still weighs about 1,100 kilograms because it not just bone, it the entire front half of the animal. Most fossils are flattened over time, but this Nodosaur kept its three-dimensional shape. The preservation was so incredible that scientists could study its armor plates and scales to reconstruct its protective covering. They even found tiny fragments of red pigment, which told them its coloration, likely a dark reddish-brown on top, with a lighter belly. This camouflage would have helped it hide from giant predators. Even some of its internal organs and the contents of its last meal were preserved. Of course, this Nodosaur isn't the only perfectly preserved ancient creature. You've probably heard of Sue, the famous Tyrannosaurus rex. In 1990, fossil collector Sue Hendrickson was surveying cliffs in South Dakota. Her team's truck got a flat tire, and while the others went to get it fixed, she took a walk. That's when she noticed small bone fragments at the base of a cliff. Sue's fossil was 90% complete by mass, which is unheard of for a T-Rex. The secret in both cases is water. The Nodosaur likely died near a river. Maybe there was a flood, or a riverbank collapsed. Its body bloated with gases and floated downstream, eventually drifting out into the ancient sea. It was a chain of incredibly unlikely events. If it had sunk just a few meters away, it would have been outside the mining zone and never found SU. The T-Rex also benefited from a quick burial. Her body was rapidly covered by mud and sand in a riverbed, which protected her skeleton from being scattered by scavengers or worn away by the elements. This idea of using water for preservation isn't new. Ancient humans did something similar. Prehistoric hunters would sometimes store mammoth meat in cold ponds and lakes, which acted like natural refrigerators. The cold oxygen-poor water slowed decay, keeping the meat edible for months. Paleontologists even tested this by submerging animal carcasses in low-oxygen water and confirmed that it works surprisingly well. Another ancient method was simply burying food. This shielded it from heat, sunlight, and oxygen. But perhaps the strangest technique was used in northern Europe, where people stored butter in peat bogs. The unique chemistry of the bogs kept the butter from going bad, though it did pick up a very strong earthy flavor. Sometimes preservation happens in unexpected ways. Take another dinosaur mummy, nicknamed Dakota. It was found in an area where the humid climate should have destroyed any soft tissue. But scientists now think scavengers actually helped preserve it. After it died, small scavengers punctured the skin, which let gases and fluids escape. This prevented the body from bloating and rotting from the inside. Then, larger predators ate the nutrient-rich organs, leaving mostly skin and bone. The openings allowed the carcass to dry out quickly, like a piece of jerky, before it was eventually buried and fossilized. But not all of these ancient, well-preserved bodies end up in museums. Meet Blue Babe, a 50,000-year-old steppe bison from Alaska. It was attacked and killed by an ancient lion, then froze solid almost instantly. It was frozen so fast that its muscle tissue still had the texture of jerky, and its fat and bone marrow were still intact. When scientists found the body in 1979, they did something incredible. In 1984, the paleontologist who led the excavation hosted a dinner party. The main course, a stew made from Blue Babe's thawed neck meat, and apparently it tasted pretty good, and no one got sick. This wasn't even the first time someone tried to eat an ancient animal. In 1901, a Siberian expedition found a mammoth so perfectly preserved it still had grass in its mouth. Stories claim its meat was served at a mammoth banquet in St. Petersburg, but these tales are likely exaggerated. In reality, most mammoth meat is disgusting. Over thousands of years, the fat turns into a waxy, soap-like substance called adiposia, which smells and tastes awful. The muscle tissue, damaged by ice crystals, turns into a foul-smelling mush when it thaws. Scientists aren't just tasting ancient animals. Some are drinking ancient water. Researchers in Antarctica often melt ancient ice cores for drinking water. Some using 100,000-year-old ice to chill their drinks. But the oldest water ever found would be a terrible choice for a beverage. Discovered 2.6 kilometers underground in Canada, this water is 2.6 billion years old. It's incredibly salty, has the consistency of diluted maple syrup, and turns orange when exposed to air because of its high iron content. Sometimes that ancient water can hold life. In South African gold mines, scientists found microbes living in pockets of water that had been isolated for tens of millions of years. This discovery raises the fascinating question of what else might be living deep within our planet. This incredible preservation isn't just about looking into the past, it might help us shape the future. In 2010, scientists found Yucca, a baby mammoth that had been frozen for nearly 35,000 years. She was so well preserved that they were able to extract liquid blood from her veins. This discovery has reignited the ambitious project to bring mammoths back to life. The plan is to create a hybrid elephant with mammoth traits like thick fur and a resistance to cold. Because mammoths and Asian elephants share 99% of their DNA, it's theoretically possible these cold-adapted elephants could then be released into the Arctic, where they could help stabilize the melting permafrost by compacting the soil and knocking down trees, just like their ancestors did. If this works for mammoths, who's next? Maybe the Tasmanian tiger, a carnivorous marsupial that went extinct in 1936. Scientists have already sequenced its genome from museum specimens. The challenge is finding a surrogate mother. The plan is to use a tiny mouse-like marsupial called a nut. But even if they succeed, it's one thing to recreate an animal's DNA, and another thing entirely to recreate its behavior. Of course, the ultimate time capsules are made of amber. This fossilized tree resin can preserve insects, feathers, and even small lizards in stunning three-dimensional detail. You can see the veins on a fly's wing or the individual lenses in its eyes. But the process is incredibly rare. The right tree has to produce the resin, trap an organism, fall into oxygen-poor soil, get buried for millions of years, and then be brought back to the surface. Each piece of amber is a miracle. But before you get your hopes up for a real-life Jurassic Park, we're not going to find a dinosaur trapped in amber, unless, of course, a tree was unimaginably huge and a T-Rex was having a very, very bad day. Thanks for watching. If you found this as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more journeys into our planet's incredible past. See you next time.